Our first session for today is The Medium is the Message, including Andrea, Lissoni, Khalil, Joreige, and moderated by Dr. Alia, السنوسي. The panel will be discussing film and art, the message through the medium. Enjoy it.
Hello, everyone. Greetings. Wonderful to see you all on day 2 of this kind of incredible moment, historic, groundbreaking, the Diriyah Contemporary Art Biennale, the inaugural edition. And here I have 2 very dear friends on stage with me, Khalil, Joreige, and Andrea, Lissoni. And we're going to be talking, in a way, it's almost the segue to the rest of what we will see over the coming 3 months. It's, as a Biennale, it is not just about the works that we see in JACs 1 through 6, but also what is happening around the city and with the public program that has been so kind of incredibly curated and generously put together by the team here. So as part of that, there will be pop-up independent cinema. And thank you to Movie and Telfaz. And here we have had Khalil, who's just been at the Red Sea Film Festival and is with us now. And the debate of film versus art, or let's say a narration, and what does that mean? Is a movie or is a movie art, or are actors artists? And Khalil and his wife, Joanna Hajitoma, who sends us greetings from Paris and has just been in Jeddah, have really balanced their work and their practice and moved fluidly between the two as artists and filmmakers. So to pay tribute and start with the artist on stage with us, Khalil, are you an artist? Are you a filmmaker?
Hi, Alia. Thank you very much for the invitation. And actually, from the beginning, it was a problem. It was a problem because the art world always looked at us as filmmaker, and the film industry was looking at us as artists, and both were afraid, meaning there was a kind of preconceived idea that we can't do something. You have to choose one direction. And from the beginning, it was very different. And this is, sometime I'm going to show you images. Please, can we have the slides? Okay, we'll wait. Actually, I want to show you a work called The Circle of Confusion, which is basically a picture of Beirut cut into 3,000 pieces, and the visitors are invited to come and take a fragment. And behind each fragment, it is written, Beirut does not exist. This is a direct quote to Lacan about a seminar about women, where he was saying that women does not exist, which is actually a place of production of meanings. For us, it was important because it is also a way for us to always escape definitions. In our work, we try always to disturb the positions that are preconceived from the beginning with everybody. And we came to our practices because we didn't study neither art or cinema. We studied literature, actually, and philosophy. And then we came out to start to practice out of a necessity. This is what we call it, because we have to deal with certain situations, especially in the aftermath of the Lebanese civil war. We were afraid that things will happen again, or things are not resolved, and we have to deal with this situation. So for us, it was a way to always refuse the definition. So we are neither an artist, neither a man, neither a couple, neither Lebanese, because we have to redefine each time another territory, another possibility, and try to escape definition, to bring a certain, to present a certain complexity in the situation, to reveal the complexities that we were facing in that places. So this is where it does not exist. So from the beginning, either when we were practicing this is, for example, a short film. It's the only one that we did commissioned by television, where the television asked us to do something like Beirut seen by John and Khalil, and we decided to do something where we are not seeing anything, to completely burn the outside and to work on this notion of evocation. Our artwork is, this is our first feature film. Our artwork is always linked with the two practices, meaning the cinema, for example, even in this work, Wonder Beirut, it is the tool of cinema are there because we invent a character exactly like when you write a script. There's a character, Abdallah Farah. He has a life, he has a practice, and we lived with him during 6 years. Abdallah Farah, no need to introduce him because it's not the topic here. But basically, it was a photographer in the 60s who took the postcards, and during the war, he tried to destroy them, not to destroy them, he tried to make his reel more close to the realities that were happening. So he destroyed his images according to the events that were happening in the Lebanese civil war. And in the same time, he was taking pictures without developing them. And this picture depicts a little bit his life in Lebanon during the aftermath. So these are all the films that were shot but not revealed. So it's a whole work about latency. Why we are talking about latency here, it's also because it was something that we felt a lot during that period, and that I think that is common here, is that we exist even if you don't see us. It's that we exist even if the condition of our visibility are not there. A latent image is something that is taken but not revealed yet. And this is something I think quite important in our region, especially about. Yesterday, everybody was presenting themselves as storytellers. So I want to say I'm also a storyteller with Joanna. A storyteller that was trying to deal with the specific situations that we were having in Lebanon. And I think that with Andrea, we're gonna talk about the evolution of the storytelling that is happening, especially in the region. Because at the beginning, for example, we were trying to find a way to tell our story when we have a problem with our history. How you can tell a story, how you can have, for example, a hero after a civil war. The figure of the fathers are sometimes problematic, I would say. So, for example, how you are gonna build a hero, how you're gonna build a narrative. So we were taking more into a kind of work on a state, on a pure present, where you don't have the traditional causality. For example, in Lebanon at that time, and still today, if you kill somebody, you don't go to jail. You bomb a city, you don't go to jail. So you see this kind of causality. So you don't have, for example, a thriller in Lebanon. It's quite difficult to imagine. So for us, now this is something changing, this relation to the history, maybe because we are facing a new state, something that is quite different, a new rupture, especially with the explosion. Something happened in the real, and that we have to deal with it. So most of our work, because this one is linear. This is, sometimes you do works that are coming from films, and you don't know exactly how you're gonna present them in the art, in a space. So this is, for example, a super 8 millimeters, a roll of 3 minutes, where it was a film that my uncle shot before he was kidnapped. And I found the film 15 years after. He was still not developed. I decided to develop it, and it ended by being completely veiled. But I scanned all the pictures, and we decided to do this installation that you know, that is called 180 seconds, which is actually all the frames of the super 8mm films that are presented. And no, it's not me. No. So you see, each image exists by itself, but all together there is a difficulty to experiment something like this. You have to be in face of it, because when you see it from far, it seems completely white, and when you come closer, you start to see these goats that are coming. We worked mainly because we have to by project. For example, the work that you saw before was related to my uncle that was kidnapped. A Perfect Day is a film about the missing person, the people who have been kidnapped in Lebanon. So it's a film about a person who gonna declare his father dead after 15 years. So it's based like this, and we are trying to work on the notion of rhythm, how you can share the same rhythm as a way to live together. In the film, Malik, the son, managed to convince his mother to declare his father dead after 15 years. For Malik, his father died 15 years ago. For his mother, he is dying today. The same event is lived with such a gap. And maybe cinema for us is a way to try to experiment things together in a synchronicity. We are living an event together in the same theater. This is probably how we're going to introduce the topic that is coming after. Because we are working, yesterday Sam was talking about encounters. It's at the core of our work. In all our films, fiction films, we never give the scenario to the actors. We're going to work on improvisation with them. We write a script, all the crew will have it, but we expect in the film to, during the shooting, to let the event occur, meaning to have the feeling that something is happening, something that is singular, that is not repeated, something that is real.
Surprising.
Surprising, and even during the discussion, for example, I hope that it will be a talk, not a speech, not a lecture, a talk, meaning a conversation. It is linked to what we were saying yesterday a little bit, and maybe it will be very quickly kind of, I'm not going to present everything. It is the place when we were talking yesterday about encounter is how you create the possibility of the encounter, meaning how you create the setup where things can happen. So it's another kind of territory. It's considering like the places where these are happening as important.
Because that's, I mean, the role of the curator, I think, in terms of the way in which they can present or find those moments. No, of course, the artists are at the core, but I'm saying in terms of the curator will help manage, let's say, that situation. I think managing the encounter is sometimes, we don't want to use the word discovery, but it's almost then that is the platform for the act of the encounter.
Yes. Thank you, Alia, for having me here, and thank you, everyone. I'm so proud and excited to be in this historical moment, as everyone keeps saying, and I could witness. And it's beautiful to be here talking about something that is so fragile but also important, which is really the encounter and somehow the difference between exactly what happens here. Like there is a cinema over there. There's a place where you screen films, and there's has a specific code, a specific language, a specific story, and the possibility of an encounter. And when you enter the show, you encounter Sarah Morris, Munir Al-Qadiri, and William Kentridge, and all these artists are challenging the way that apparatus over there has been built, not the black box in which you choose normally to see something that has a specific length, a specific, let's say, code in which you sit, and you don't necessarily see the person next to you, and you just are exposed to this frontal journey. Whilst when you walk into a space and you see an exploded screen or a narrative, then you have an encounter. And this encounter, I think the curators and not the programmers, which is more the film, let's say, history, let's say, curator, are generating and are triggering and trying to install, knowing that that experience generates also time in the visitor, no? Because it's like a time-based form, and has to do with space, and has to do with the shadows, has to do with the cone of light, or with the light that gets into you if it's a LED screen. So all that are codes that I think every curator that has to do with moving images has to play with, and has to play in the narratives he or she wants to build. And I think by saying this, I introduced the sort of rigorous, very personal experience, difference that I tried to set in the institution I used to work beforehand at the Tate Modern between moving images, something that you encounter, that you put in the galleries, regardless of the galleries being white or black or gray. Particularly the one I was working on at the Tate were completely gray, concrete, and that was an ideal field because the gray is in between the black and the white, so it's the perfect non-space, and the cinema experience, no? And the cinema experience is still the film experience, which gladly still travels. So I could build my own experience about Beirut without never have been to Beirut, thanks to your films, to the films of Akram Zatari, to the films of Rabim Roued, the lecture performances. I could encounter a territory thanks to something that travels, like cinema. Whilst these works, of course, travel, but differently, no? And they travel, and they also, in the last years, we learned that they are also more challenging. They are not necessarily meant to travel all over the world as they could, as they should. So I think somehow I answered saying, yes, the curator takes care, but generates experiences in space. But there are two words, and the two words are like looking to each other, sometimes in a suspicious way, sometimes in a very friendly way. But they both generate amazing experiences, I think. And I still believe that the fact that cinema in its form being completely no longer analogic, or sometimes analogic, makes encounters of another kind happening in places where it doesn't happen, right? So, as I said, like growing up in between Paris and Italy, I could picture a town I never been in my life before, and that like triggered my experience of it.
I mean, cinema transports you in that way. I mean, not that,
Sure.
you know, kind of what we would see in an exhibition doesn't, but there's something about storytelling and seeing a plot unfold, or, you know, having that almost immersive experience of watching.
Yeah, but there are some stories that are sometimes unbelievable in the storytelling. For example, I just pass quickly. What kind of story we can tell and we can believe in a specific country, meaning in Lebanon, after the war of 2006, we were quite disturbed because we were facing a shrinking of our possibilities of making films again. What kind of fiction can you tell after a huge war? So this is the moment where we invoke Catherine Deneuve. Sorry, I have to go back. Catherine Deneuve. Okay, let's say that the war was a kind of rupture in our history, and we try to invoke another history to be able to bridge, to build this bridge, and invoke another history, be it the history of cinema. So we asked Catherine Deneuve to come and experiment with us the possibility of a fiction after that. So she came with her history and the history of cinema, and we ask Rabia Mroué, who's our dear friend and mainly he's part of all our film, to provoke this encounter, the encounter of those two histories. If those two characters will manage to make a shot counter shot, it will be the possibility of a fiction. It will be as a figure of cinema, it will be the moment where they will meet. They will be in presence. So this notion of presence is at the core of what we were saying here, because it's the possibility of an encounter is to acknowledge the presence of the other. But at the same time, this is something I will not tell I'm not talking, it's linked to all the, there are some stories that are sometimes unbelievable, even if they are true. For example, after that, we decided to work on this project, the Lebanese Rocket Society. It was a project that happened in Lebanon, and nobody was aware of this, or nobody was even believing that there was a space project in Lebanon in the 60s, where actually a group of people in an Armenian university conceived, developed, and launched more than 10 rockets for space exploration. In this project, it was the first time that we decided to mix our practice of art and cinema by putting inside the work, let's say, experimentations coming from our art practice, especially when we decided to reactivate the past in a present, but not in a nostalgic way, by referring and making a reconstitution of a rocket, because, okay, what's happening? That rocket was built in the 60s for space exploration, and in their goal, it was to build peace. Because by education and technology, we were building peace. If you think about a rocket today in our region, you will not conceive it for peace.
It is most definitely the opposite.
So we decided to fight against the shrinking of those meanings. For them, it was like, it was for peace. Okay, so let's do a sculpture, a reconstitution of it, and cross all the street of Beirut with it by saying, this is not a missile. This is a sculpture. Okay, we need a lot of authorization. It was quite difficult to do, and we had fun. But for us, it was a way of fighting against the shrinking of the meaning. Exactly like when we took Catherine Deneuve and Rabia Mroué at the borders, where it was not possible anymore to do films anymore, and because it was Catherine Deneuve, because it was cinema, and it was an army of occupation, the crew. We were like 100 persons. So they are going to shoot us all? So these are the tools that we try to reinvent, to invoke in both disciplines, in both mediums, to try to enlarge our territory, to enlarge the possibility of being in that region and to try to do other things. For this, so we create the rocket, but the transportation of the rocket was quite problematic because we were really in a hurry in Lebanon. And we were really afraid. So we were not able to do nice picture of it. So we decided to redo it after, but instead of the rocket, just its silhouette. No, this is where it is exposed. This is a film. It ended with an animation. I will talk about it later if we have time. So instead of having the rocket, we took a 2D of the image, of the rocket, and here we tried to perform it, but in a photographic way. So the transportation of the rocket in a frame would be the shutter speed. So the performative thing stayed there. So you never do it in the first time. Okay.
This idea of the unbelievable, then, you know, yet it is a reality. I mean, that's almost something like the idea of the surreal, or living the surreal. And I think I think with Joanna I spoke a little bit about this in terms of the explosion, that it was this moment of true reality, and absolutely the worst kind of reality, but also completely surreal.
Yeah, this is about situation, like the explosion, because Joanna was very close to the explosion when it happened, and it took her a while to realize what happened, and this is also, yeah, it is a difficulty to perceive in the real what happened, because you are suddenly in another scale, another, as I would say, as artists, we are always thinking about how we can represent things. And this is something you have so much difficulty to perceive, that you have difficulty to be able to represent even for yourself, not even for the others. So yeah, it took us very far after in different exploration for the next project. This is something.
In terms of your conversation, you were in kind of deep and meaningful yesterday, having this discussion about, the medium is the message, correct? And so Andrea, in your role at Tate Modern, which was specific to film, but then also about almost breaking the mold at Tate, at a very, in a way, traditional institution, but also radical, groundbreaking methods in which you will represent and present the work of artists. So maybe a little glimpse into your conversation yesterday for the audience.
Okay, I can try. At first, I guess what Alia just raised is a beautiful trigger, a beautiful beginning of a story. So you were talking about surrealism and the work that that has been made in the last years, in the last 20 years, even more, by the two of you, doesn't have necessarily to do with surrealism, but has to do with a specific, let's say, story, which is a story of artists making film. At some stage, something happened, and in that moment, in like the moment of surrealism, first Dadaism and then surrealism, artists started making something that wasn't conventionally intended as the cinematic experience. So be Buñuel, be someone like Maya Deren, she changed completely the history of that practice. It's called the artist cinema. That begins, happens, becomes experimental cinema, and that's, I think it's very important to be shared, because it's how, I guess, you can also frame the fact or deframe the fact that you are making films that are not necessarily following the main narrative of the Hollywood industries, but you're stretching that. And that stretching, that opening the frame, comes also from amazing artists who've been like making something else out of that medium, right? So yesterday we were discussing, and this is an ongoing conversation, about what does it mean for an institution to acknowledge the medium film, and what is the difference between moving images and film, and how the medium film can be groundbreaking in an institution, and then you have to go back to the history of institutions. So in the case of the Tate, there is no film collection. It's not like MoMA or like Pompidou. You have no film collection. You don't want to have it because actually you have next door an amazing film museum and say that's their role. Yet you're in a country where there's an incredible tradition of structural filmmakers and experimental cinema. How do you acknowledge all these artists? And how do you witness the fact that the most exciting artists of the younger generation are using the medium film? So it became a sort of Trojan horse for us and for me, and that was a little bit my role, to bring in regular artist screenings, always dealing with the artist and never with the distribution company, never with the industry that I have no clue about how it works, very honestly, to generate a pace that will, on the one hand, represent a dialogue between former and established artist filmmakers and younger practices, but mostly to enable an important, charged and loaded institution that, being a blockbuster-driven institution, can show practice that have to do with indigeneity, inequality, structural racism, questions related to gender, that are the main preoccupation of the younger generation, to be brought in. And that perhaps also allows the institution at some stage to blockchain, because an institution also makes story, like being itself, it becomes an history, makes a narrative, and to look back and say, look back 5 years ago, that film by Sky Opinka was screened. We are now having a indigeneity collection preoccupation. Perhaps this artist is the artist we can start from, right? So that was a sort of programmatic, institutional attitude to acknowledge a practice that we think looks like a minority practice, but a fundamental practice, because it's where you can experiment to bring stories in, but also a way to generate a story that we didn't want to be forgotten as the story of Sandra Maldoror. Let's take an amazing experimental artist and filmmaker who's been really representing what does it mean, blackness in Africa, with a surrealistic approach, and that it's still not enough seen as the real, let's say, point from where someone like Pedro Costa starts, no? So that's a making example. They're very cinematic, but I need to do them because that's how the institution thinks. Like, how do you open up stories through maybe little drops that generate cracks that you want being the one that make the institution not crumbling, but resonating.
And Khalil, you were saying that there is a kind of a crisis moment right now in terms of this relationship to, independent cinema, to cinemas in the context of an institution.
There are several crises. There's a global crisis in the world because there's a confusion that is happening between films that are presented for streamers and films that are conceived for the theater. It is not the same kind of film at all. Streamer, we were talking with Andrea about the importance of the physical place, the theater, which is the place of the encounter, because it's a neutral place. It's a place that is not yours. So when you go to a place that is like here, your perception is different from if you look at the film in your, even if the conditions sometimes are better in your place than in the cinema. It happened, especially in the Arabic world. It happened more often, especially the sound. But nevertheless, when you are in a neutral place, you are not in your comfort zone. You are not in your place. And you are in a place, especially in the Arabic world, where we are building something different in the society. We are building a common place. Not the public place, the common place. So we worked a lot in Lebanon for a place called Metropolis, that with all the events is now closed, but we are going to open it in another way, because it's a place where we are.
So explain the difference between the public versus the common.
Public is, I will call it, it's related to, let's say, something related to state attitude, where I cannot, for example, myself, pretend of creating anything public, but I will create something common. I will, where we can share, but because I don't want, as an individual, to become an institution. It's not the same when you are an institution and when you are just an artist trying to work at your level, at your scale, and with your direct environment. This is why, and for me, it's very important to make this distinction, because I don't want to be an institution. I don't want to, you see, I still want to experiment in an institution. He will not be completely agreeing with me.
No, I completely, I can also expand on this.
But usually, institution cannot experiment, because they have a responsibility of a continuity. Here, the title of the Biennale is great when you think if you have to work.
Feeling the stone.
Feeling the stone. It's also a question of rhythm, because you cannot work fast when you have to feel the stones, because if not, you fall. Institution can't fall.
So on that, I'll just say a little, as Andrea and I were talking yesterday, and was drawn a little tribute to Akim Borchardt Hume, who was really instrumental in that, in pushing the Tate in those incremental ways.
Yes. I'm admired by let's say, honestly, the punctual question you're asking and how the dialogue unfolds. I want to expand on this, because actually I agree. The institution is representing, particularly if it's a public institution, representing citizens and needs to be public. I think it should be experimenting, and I'm aware that we are experimenting full steam, and now I'm taking charge, a loaded stone institution, and I want to push it to the maximum level of experimentation. But I believe the commons are what I'm working on since ever. I mean, if the institution, as a public institution, generates something that we call imaginary, let's say, use old terminology, then that's the commons. And the fact that we were together in that whatever moment here, now, in front of that piece on that biennial, generates an imaginary that stays with us, and that's the common. And if we are, as representative of institution, good, and we should be good at leading direction we want to lead, not with the idea of leading, but with the idea of generating many possible layers of commonality, then we got it. I mean, that's exactly how a function of a public institution should be. And I guess you're running the cinema or running a space that is inevitably public, although not publicly funded or not wanting to be public, will be generating a form of commonality and commons. And this is, I guess, our scope and the reason why we should try to be always in dialogue, I guess, no? Because that's how the position of artists and an institution can find themselves connected through media like cinema or sound or whatever we think it's relevant for us.
It is even more it's not only about a space, it's about temporalities. It's meaning all our work is to try to move this definition of a territory from a geography to a temporality where we can meet, even if we are coming from different places, we can share a same concern, a same problematic that is moving us, and this is what we're going to share. This is even more important. We can be from this different generation and be contemporary. This is the meaning of contemporary, sharing the same time. So for us, there's something else also that is incredible in this kind of place where you go outside your comfort zone, because suddenly things happen that are close to serendipity, like something occurs that you were really not expecting. Even if, you can have even sometimes preconceived idea. I had some preconceived idea about this region. And I was astonished, and I have to acknowledge that I was surprised in a very good way to see a public in Jeddah applauding, and for films that is quite different from what they are using, and so it was really
I mean,
moving.
it's surprising to have cinema at all in Saudi Arabia, and until it was inconceivable, and then it wasn't, and then it was reality. So it's almost as if that act of that shift, it is a radical shift. And I mean, yes, of course, incremental changes, but at the same time, radical change and extremely rapid change. And to show your movie memory box, which hopefully the Biennale audience will get to see at some point very soon here in the cinema, but a region that was also, and not just a region, but a country that also only had access to film via YouTube. So that idea of YouTube versus so streaming versus
this is the word, but actually, memory box is based on the notebooks that Joanna used to write when she was a teenager. From 82 to 88, her best friend left to Paris, and they promised that they're gonna write every day. And this is what they did during this several. Oh, this is it's back. So let me go. So, and after, of course, they lost.
An incredibly poignant film. I mean, it really touched many of us.
They lost contact after, during 25 years, and suddenly this friend reappeared at an exhibition. And she said that she kept all Joanna's notebook, and Joanna said, I kept yours. So they swap. Joanna had all her notebooks back. We decided our daughter wanted to read them, and we decided it wouldn't be a good idea because it was not exactly the stories that Joanna told us that was present in the notebook. However, we decided, and this is why I'm talking about, we decided in the fiction memory box, because it's a fiction, to add my archive, my photographic archive, because what Joanna was doing it in notebooks, I was doing it with the camera. And my archive is nearly 60,000 still images, which is not so much, especially when I noticed that my daughter, at the same period, she was 14, installed Snapchat, and that she took 50,000 images in 6 months. Of course, it is not the same kind of images. In my daughter's, I have no selfie in my pictures. This is memory box.
You never took a selfie?
With my stills, with my big camera at that time. No, it was not. Meaning the kind of medium changed completely the paradigm of images. We were taking picture with the whole body. You have a viewfinder on your eyes. It was not your hand. So there was another kind of relation. You were stick to the camera. It was you. Where now it's something else. At the beginning, I was having a certain, I was judgmental to my, towards the attitude of my daughter with Snapchat. Like, you are always on your smartphone. But little by little, by working with the fin, on the fin, so these are the notebook and the tapes. It was important.
They record the recorded conversations.
Yeah. Joanna used to do these moods of the day during months. But I can show you very briefly. This is a kind of...
Maya Sanders.
Oui, c'est ma mère.
C'est pas pour nous.
C'est quoi tout ça?
C'est des cahiers que j'écrivais quand j'étais encore au Liban à une amie qui était partie vivre en France.
Qui est ça? Ah bon?
إذا بتخيل شو صار قصص هيدا اللي عم يسوق كتير حلو اسمه رجل
Je ne connais pas ma mère. Elle a tellement changé.
Parce que tu lis les cahiers de ta mère? Arrête ça va te rendre folle. ليلتها تبكت على التقيل بس بيروت عم تتدمر أكتر وأكتر.
Je t'avais interdit de toucher à mes cahiers.
C'est ma faute? Tu dis jamais rien. Raja, son amie Lisa à la guerre, elle m'en a jamais parlé. Tout ce que tu dis, c'est des mensonges. Toute ta vie, c'est un mensonge. Raconte-moi ce qui se passe après, j'ai besoin de savoir.
Je sais plus ce qui est vrai. Où ça commence. Quand je termine les choses.
Every mind, there's a place made of all.
A trade is still in process. So here, you see the relation to the phone changed completely our way of behaving. It's the way that we took images, why we are taking images, the latency, all those topics are not the same at all, and they cannot be the same. So we have to acknowledge this change of paradigm in the images.
So equally important then perhaps for the process of working with an artist is to delve into that idea of archive then, and to delve into research and the latent image. I mean, not just showing the film or not just showing the work in the institution.
Yes, and I am so glad that we could watch this trailer, because this is, I guess, the real bridge. Somehow this could be an exhibition, right? Because this is composed as an exhibition somehow, although it's not an exhibition, it's a film. And the way it dives into your main preoccupation, the way it dives into memory, the way it brings memory forward, the way it softly relates to a community of friends and peers and artists, which is, I guess, the most important. We were talking about community of artists yesterday here. It's astonishing. And that's what makes the film not only a masterpiece, but also an inspiration for those that are working in institutions that I guess are supporting artists, but also trying to compose pieces that seems not making sense, that may come from the past, and they may have to make sense for the present and the future. So, and that's why we kind of are very close, despite the black box or the white cube with the gray zone, because we have this responsibility. And then we can decide to go for beautiful, let's say, statements, like having for sure 2 or 3 moments of wild dance in a movie, as you can have 2, 3 moments of wild dance in an exhibition when you buy it, and that generates a pace and the rhythm that we are talking about. So I guess this what we could learn, I could literally learn from the cinema that you made in the past years and your peers made, is exactly this: how a film can generate an exhibition and therefore a way of sharing and producing communality, right? And that's, I think it's quite beautiful because that's the medium film, no?
I mean, yeah.
Can I ask him a question? Andrea,
Well, I
what
was
do you
just about
think?
to segue into Q&A, so it's perfect.
What do you think if, starting from that work, from that film, I will do artwork that will derive from it? Will you be disappointed?
I think if you follow the principle of this generating something else, but not illustrating this, then I won't be. This is like the example of the rocket. It's like if the project of the film existing with the rocket is a leading process, I will endorse this. I will say, just go it, because if a piece of history produces an artwork that then becomes something else, that's how this is the principle I believe in. Personally, I believe in non-ending stories, and I believe in the fact that something triggers something else, and always triggers something else. It doesn't stop in time and in space, right? So if it wasn't illustrating, of course, then it's up to you. I mean, you're the artist. I'm just
No, but it's
it's
a real question, because you can imagine that we received several propositions, but and most of the time, because we are part of a generation that was interested in the document and how to deal with document, and we had like what the images of these are. For me, it's a documentation, but in other work, it was a work of art.
No doubt.
You see, so so here it's quite complex for me.
It's like generation versus illustration.
Exactly, but then actually here we are perfectly in an exhibition site, because we have this image and that image just over there by a completely different artist with totally different preoccupation that belongs to perhaps partially the same culture. And that's here we are in the exhibition time space, because me, I see your work, but actually I see a work over there that I just saw that stays in my memory. And that's what makes the experience of, I hope, a visitor meaningful, because actually I see this, but I basically imagine what is the sound of this. That's what I learned from the generation of Catherine David. What is the territoire intime? What is the intimacy of the territory? It's like imagining what kind of sound is here drives my gaze. Maybe I'm a little bit too complicated, but that's how I hope it should be. I mean, going beyond the document, no?
Yeah. So we have time for, I think, one question from the audience, if there's any. Although we can just have Khalil and Andrea do their own Q&A session too. Oh, we have a question over here.
I hope for you.
I don't think so. Oh, thank you so much. That was super interesting. I wanted to ask a question about, you spoke a lot about storytelling and the history and the relationship between, I guess, creation of an artwork and history. And I was wondering how you pick or choose what side of history to present. I mean, history is written by the winners usually, and then there's this whole idea of the relativity of truth. You know, everyone's truth is kind of different. So as you're creating something, the moment in time and the stance where you are looking into it, how do you choose or determine what truth you want to present? And then I was also wondering about the experience of, you were speaking about the public and the private, where art is now being experienced so differently. Does that also influence how you create something? how the audience will experience it.
For the storytelling, and Joanna and me, we were interested by something we call the anecdote, by its etymology. The anecdote is the story, the secondary story, the story kept secret, that is not so important, that is next to the official discourse, next to the big narrative. You have other places that are still vivid. Let's call it them like this. We can be interested, a narrative for us in the process. Being a couple and working together is actually a huge enterprise of destruction of the project of the other. Okay? So basically, Joanna, or I come with an idea, Joanna would destroy it. If it managed not to become too, like to keep some stones, we will use them for the project. I mean, there's always something that have to resist to our own interrogation, our own, it came from a necessity. This is what pushed us to start to work. This is what keep us working today. We start always with a question, and this question must be true. I don't like the word true, but because you say it, I would use it here. But we worked, for example, on the whole project on spam internet and scams that were here. It is linked to the same storytelling. The spam that you receive, I'm the son of Gaddafi, the Mubarak, I have 10 million. I didn't say Gaddafi for you, but however, I have a huge proposition for you. I have $40 million. If you help me, you would get 10%. You know that this narrative is a very old narrative. It is called the Jerusalem letter. It was present just after the French Revolution. And this kind of scams function very well. People are believing it. You have $2 billion that are transferred just from the US for those scams. So, meaning, when we start to dig in the project, we notice that the scammers are being scammed also by scam beaters, okay, and scam eaters. Meaning there's a condition in which you cannot believe in a story. Why you will believe that Catherine Deneuve is playing something? Why you believe that the rocket was a real or a fake project? There's a certain context where you can believe in a story or not. If I tell you that I have $10 million and I'm Iraqi, you will believe it more than if I tell you I have $10 million and I'm German. You're not German, but imagine. You see, in cash I'm talking, not in your account.
Well, on that, we'll conclude to storytelling, to truth, and I suppose the role of the artist and the institution in presenting it to us for encounters. Thank you very much.
Thank you.